Okay, members, the sitting is resumed. I have received notice from the First and Deputy First Ministers that they wish to make a statement setting out the Executive's pathway out of COVID-19 restrictions. Before I call the Minister, I remind members here in the Chamber that in light of social distancing being observed by the parties, the Speaker's ruling that members must be in the Chamber to hear a statement if they wish to ask the question has been relaxed. Members participating remotely must make sure their name is on the speaking list if they wish to be called. Members present in the Chamber must do so by rising in their places, as well as notifying the Business Office or Speaker table directly. I remind members to please be concise when asking their questions. This is not a debate per se. So, on that basis, then I call the First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to update the Assembly today on our decisions last week on education and at this morning's Executive. Before outlining the detail, Mr. Speaker, it is important to set out our decisions in context. COVID-19 is still with us in our community. Today we have 176 COVID inpatients in our hospitals. 18 people were in ICU with COVID. There were 13 active care home outbreaks being managed. 164 people tested positive with COVID-19, and unfortunately we have a further death. These are, of course, better numbers than we have seen in recent times since the latest restrictions took effect on the 26th of December. But these numbers still tell us that caution is important. We have seen how numbers can rise rapidly, and we do not want to go back there. That is why we published our pathway out of restrictions on the 2nd of March, and we outlined our rationale in our statement to the Assembly that day. To summarise our rationale in one phrase: cautious but optimistic. Small steps along the pathway, with time built in to help us take stock of the impact on the ground. Time to reflect, analyse the data and structure the next steps in the pathway in that context. Our colleagues in the Department of Health have coined the phrase social contact capital. It's a helpful way of understanding the situation we are in. We have an amount of decision-making capital which we can afford to spend, and we need to spend it wisely each time in the interests of as many people as possible. If we spend the capital on one easement of restrictions, it can't be spent on other things at the same time. That's why it's very important that we work our way through the restrictions in a careful and managed way at each 4-week review point. That is why we are not setting dates, so that we can take our decisions against the prevailing health, economic and societal circumstances. The Executive is clear on the need to think especially hard about our children and young people. Last week we decided that preschool, nursery and primary school pupils in P1 to P3 would remain in school until the start of the Easter break. Meanwhile, students in years 12 to 14 would still return to face-to-face teaching effective from next Monday. And today we have considered further the steps we should take, rightly, to provide more certainty for our children and young people, parents, teachers and the whole education family. So today, having taken into account the prevailing COVID situation and with care and caution, Primary 4 to Primary 7 should return from the 22nd of March, and all pupils, including years 8 to 11, will fully resume on the 12th of April. These decisions are aimed primarily at getting our children back to school in the safest way possible, with mitigations and preparation time. That has benefits for us all. We have been very concerned throughout about the impacts for the education of our young people, and we know that the education sector will pull together to help address that. We have been equally concerned about the well-being impacts. We all know how important it is for children to build and grow their friendship networks, to be able to socialise and grow their own interests and future potential. So that has been our clear focus today. We think every sector in our society will understand that education has to be our priority at this time. We understand those sectors and individuals also want a bit of certainty and hope. Having taken the education decisions, the Executive went on to look at the available social contact capital to see if we could do more. Our commitment has always been that we will not leave restrictions in place for a day longer than is needed. We appreciate that we are moving quickly towards the first anniversary of the first lockdown in March last year. The weather is improving, and we have been in this current lockdown for around 80 days. That is a long time and a big ask, and we have been so grateful to everyone who has made a personal contribution to the improvement in the COVID situation. Our responsibility to you is to look carefully at how we can improve the situation for you in a careful and sustainable way. We want to give you hope, and we have discussed today a number of small steps which we hope will be welcome. We have decided that from the 1st of April, 10 people from 2 households can undertake outdoor sporting activities as defined in the regulations. Up to 6 people from 2 households may meet outdoors at a private dwelling, and garden centres and plant nurseries will be included in the contactless click and collect scheme. We have also decided that, provided the situation still supports this, the following changes will be introduced on the 12th of April. Increasing the numbers who can meet outdoors in a garden from 6 to 10, including children from 2 households. The removal of the stay-at-home provision in the legislation, moving to a stay local and work from home message. Allow contactless click and collect for all non-essential retail, subject to the overall health position at that time, and the Department for Economy evaluation of the limited 8th of March reopening of non-essential click and collect. And then allow outdoor sports training to resume by sports clubs affiliated with recognised sports governing bodies in small groups of up to 15 people, but with all indoor spaces closed except essential toilet facilities. These relaxations planned for April the 12th will be subject to executive ratification in the week after the Easter weekend. The Executive has also agreed to increase the provision for elite sports from March the 25th to allow a number of new competitions to begin. This minor adjustment to the current restrictions will allow 2 World Cup qualification matches scheduled for March 25th and 31st to take place, as well as a friendly match between Northern Ireland and the United States of America on March the 28th. No spectators will be permitted at any sporting event. It is important that we explain our rationale, as we know that some people will be disappointed that their sectors are not on this list. Our focus in our decisions today has been to take a risk-based approach, as we promised in our pathway. The common ground is that the steps are aimed at individuals and their families to support well-being and socialising in a limited and careful way. We have focused on outdoor settings, where the risk is relatively lower than indoor settings, and there are things we need you to do to continue to do, please. First and foremost, follow the public health advice, including when you're outdoors. Wash your hands and maintain social distancing. If you are meeting up with other people, plan your journey and plan what you do when you meet up. Avoid car sharing if you can. Wear a face covering and ensure good ventilation if you can't. To our colleagues in the retail sector, we realise that today's developments are modest and we have a long way to go. We thank you for your forbearance, and we recognise that large sectors of retail have been on the front line all year. We say thank you as an executive to everyone who has supplied goods, stocked shelves, served customers and looked after us all over a protracted period of time. Mr Speaker, we will now proceed to deliver these decisions into regulations and guidance changes. The next formal review period is the 15th of April, and we will be working towards that from today. There is no halt in the work that will go into that. That work starts now, and we will monitor the data closely over the coming weeks. We also want to say something about key events in the coming weeks. Tomorrow, St Patrick's Day, would normally be enjoyed by many. We need this to be different tomorrow. Please continue to stay at home. Do not socialise outside your family or your bubble. And we particularly want to say to young people that you need to follow the rules and the advice. Ahead of us, we also have Easter and Passover, important events in our faith calendars, important moments for our citizens. Myself and the Deputy First Minister met with the leaders of the 4 main churches yesterday to discuss the hope we need to give our people at Easter, and also some solace. And this year has been a hard one for people of all faiths and people of none. We have very much welcomed the opportunity to work with all faith leaders across the last 12 months, and that will continue. We need to continue to acknowledge how much people need hope and solace, and we noted in our discussion yesterday the desire of the churches to work towards a return to in-person services in time for Easter, and we acknowledge the risk involved and the mitigations required by the churches. Some places of worship will find it easier to continue with their online services, of course, and we know that this will be taken forward carefully, and we have been grateful to leaders across all faiths who have worked closely with us on a voluntary basis. We have also discussed with the church leaders the benefit of prayer and reflection and the comfort that that can bring, whether that is from the perspective of our faiths or a personal reflection on the year gone by. We think that making some time for this on Easter Sunday will be timely. It is, of course, a personal matter for everyone, but we are facing into a difficult first anniversary, and we all feel a sense of loss, whether that is loss of loved ones or loss of the things we enjoy in life. So taking a moment of prayer or reflection will be a powerful act of support for each other and a way to look forward to with hope. Mr. Speaker, we have a long way to go, but the steps that we as an executive have agreed are designed to start that process in line with our pathway commitments and to give that bit of hope that everyone is seeking. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call the chairperson of the Committee for the Executive Office, Colin McGrath. Can we bring Mr McGrath on to screen, please? Can I invite Colin McGrath to contribute?
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the First Minister for her statement today. These relaxations to the lockdown announced are well overdue in people's minds and lives. It's been a long winter and the lockdown was tough, not least on people's mental health given the long, dark and depressing winter period, and especially during January. Now, the relaxations announced today include those to our schools, with primary 4s to 7s joining P1s to P3s from next Monday, and many parents will welcome this announcement, but many teachers and principals may be a bit more reticent, given that the Education Minister promised teachers 2 weeks notice and is in practice given the majority of schools just 2 days, and in fact some of them 2 hours, given that they close today and don't open until next Monday. The announcement being made today could also stand accused of being a little bit light touch. I appreciate that people are complying as they can, but the moves are modest, and in many areas they're not budging for another 2 weeks and some further into April. Again, there isn't much information on how we get from here to the next stage, and for many in businesses or sporting fraternities, they are left again wondering when progression will be made. Could I ask the First Minister to explain the differentials between the stages that are progressing today? In some of the pathways we move to level 2 and in others we don't. In some we are moving to all of what's in the level 2 and in others only some. I predicted after the last announcement that without proper and robust messaging, these announcements will become massive confusion events. What will take place now to detail this information to people? Thank you.
Thank you to the Chairman of the Committee. Yes, we have been in lockdown for a long time. Nobody denies that that is the case. And I think it has been well signalled that the Education Minister wanted all primary school children back as quickly as possible. I welcome the fact that colleagues have agreed with that position and that children will go back to school in P4 to P7 next Monday. As I say, we've been talking about this for quite some considerable time. I do also accept from the Chairman of the Committee that these are modest lifting of restrictions. Nobody said it was going to be otherwise. We did say that we would be relying on advice from our medical advisors, and we have taken that advice, and here is what he is comfortable with given where we are in terms of the pandemic. In terms of the sporting codes, as I understand it, the Department for Communities is working with all of the sporting codes. The Minister is having ongoing discussion with the different sporting bodies. We believe that given the go-ahead for training outdoors from the 15th of April will be welcomed. The fact that people can come together in public spaces for outdoor activity from the 1st of April as well will be welcomed, albeit from 2 households before the 1st of April. And I think in terms of communication, it is incumbent upon all of us as public representatives to get the messages out in relation to what has been agreed today in terms of the relaxations, and I hope everybody will play their part in that. But no doubt there will be some who would rather seek to criticise the executive. So be it. I mean, we're big girls and boys. We can deal with that. But I think what we've brought forward today are cautious steps, but I think they are very much pointing in an optimistic direction. And as we move through now the different steps, the fact that the task force is meeting every week to look at where we are in terms of the transmission of the virus is a very helpful way forward, and we've always said we'll be as flexible as we can, and we have always said we will only keep these restrictions for as long as they are necessary, Mr. Speaker, and as long as they are proportionate. So that is what we've tried to do today, and I hope that people will take advantage of the nice weather, but in a cautious way, and recognising that COVID is very much still with us.
Thank you, and I call Robin Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her question. Sorry, thank the Minister for her statement. Minister, you're referring to the Primary 4 to Primary 7 pupils returning on the 22nd of March, followed then by Years 8 to 11. Minister, can I just ask what clarity can now be provided to parents about the return to school?
Well, I hope that we've provided that clarity. P1 to P3 and preschool are already back in school. Years 12 to 14 are back next Monday. We're now saying that years 4 to 7 should also return next Monday. I was a bit surprised when Mr McGrath said that some schools are closing tomorrow and they're not coming back to next Monday. My goodness, I'd like to go to that school to have such holidays for St Patrick's Day. Never heard of that before, but especially when the schools have been off for such a considerable period of time. And then, of course, years 8 to 11 will return in full after the Easter holidays, which is the 12th of April. And that period of the Easter holidays allows us to actually assess the impact of those children that have gone back. So it's actually useful for us to have that break in space so that we can find out how that has impacted upon the transmission of the virus.
I may call Colm Gillerny, or Colm Gillerny.
And thank you, First Minister, for the statement and for answers to those questions. The relaxation of meeting rules will undoubtedly be welcomed by those who have felt the strain of separation over the past period of time, and indeed many who have also felt the impact of loss as well, and our condolences to all of those. I have met this afternoon with the PHA, the senior team in the PHA responsible for contact tracing, and I think it is. We all wish them all the best now as that service comes back into the spotlight, in order to, as you referred to there, try to prevent us ever having to go back. And I'm sure we all wish them well in that regard and hope that that system is indeed fit for purpose. But how crucial has the vaccination programme been towards enabling this particular change? Thank you.
I thank the member the chairman for his question and his comments as well. I think people will welcome relaxation in being able to come together. People haven't been able to do that unless they've been bubbling or they've been in a care position, and there has been great strains, and people have sacrificed a lot. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that, so that we could get COVID-19 under control and in a manageable situation. So that is important. In terms of the vaccination process, as the member knows, we're now in a position where we can take bookings for the over 50s. Yesterday was a phenomenal piece of booking online. The Health Minister tells us that at one point it was 350 people per minute that was actually taking up the vaccine slots. So that's a good indicator that people are very much wanting to avail of the vaccine. There is some work ongoing at present to look at how the vaccine is impacting hospital admissions, particularly in our older residents, and we look forward to receiving that data, because I think that will be very important data. That has been done in Scotland. I don't know that it has been peer reviewed as yet, but certainly it points that the vaccine is having a real and tangible impact on the numbers of people going into hospital. So that, of course, is to be very much welcome. So the vaccine programme continues. I want to pay tribute to Patricia Donnelly and her team for the way in which they've rolled the vaccine programme out right across Northern Ireland, and I look forward to receiving the vaccine as soon as possible.
And I call Rosemary Barton.
Thank you. Thank you, First Minister, for your answers so far to what you've been asked. What consideration has been given to students in further education colleges? You speak about the schools returning, pupils returning to schools, and I'm wondering if you could give me an update on that, please, Minister.
Well, I don't have the details of that, and I'll certainly get the Minister for the Economy to come back to you on that, because I know that she has been looking at the return for some students. I think if there are, if there's a need for the student to be back for reasons for example, if you're a student at Queen's or whatever, and you have to be back for medicine or engineering or something like that, it may well be the case that further education colleges are in the same place. But as I say, I'll get the Minister for the Economy to come back to detail that for you.
I call Stuart Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, First Minister. First Minister, not all the messaging has necessarily been very clear around how we move through this pandemic and the regulations that you've placed in front of us. But now you're suggesting in this statement today that we're moving from staying at home to staying local. How will you get a very clear message out to people as to how that should be handled, particularly over the Easter holidays and the days afterwards?
I'm glad the member asked that question, because the stay-at-home message is still in place until April the 12th. So it's important to say that, because I think we are all concerned about the Easter holidays and all concerned about people coming together in the ways in which we have seen, unfortunately, sometimes in holiday destinations and country parks. So I would ask people to respect that of course we want you to get outside and enjoy the outside, but please do it in a way that doesn't cause crowds to accumulate, and I think that is very important. After April 12th, the message will change from stay at home to stay local, and we hope that is self-explanatory, so that people aren't moving very far away from home and are still working at home where possible. We do understand that a lot of people can't work from home and have to go into work, but that is the messaging on April 12th. But up till April 12th, the message is still stay at home.
I call Palm Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the First Minister for the statement to the House today. This is an incredibly difficult time with such a prolonged period of lockdown, and many are feeling the physical and mental negative impacts from these restrictions, and I think many will be quite disappointed today. Can the First Minister confirm that further changes or easements to the restrictions do not necessarily have to wait until the next formal review, which is due on the 15th of April?
So when we came with the pathway to this House, Mr. Speaker, you will recall that the only dates in the document were the actual formal review dates that the Minister of Health has to review the regulations upon. So those were the only dates in the pathway. There is flexibility in the pathway to allow us to take decisions outside of those formal review dates. Of course, we will want to assess what social contact we have in terms of the capital that we have to spend, and so we'll have to look to see what way things are moving. But yes, we can move and you will recall this last year when we moved in a faster speed coming out of some of the regulations because of the fact that we were moving in a very good way. So hopefully that will be the case again, but we need people to work with us so that we can achieve that. I just do want to acknowledge what she said about it being such a difficult time for so many people as well. It has been, both physically and mentally. We hope that the easements that have been granted around being able to get outside and meet with another household will allow people to get out and about and to enjoy what I hope will be good weather over the coming period. And I know it's only a modest relaxation, but I hope that it will help some of those people.
Pat Sheehan, I call Pat Sheehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the First Minister for her statement here today. The main argument being advanced for bringing children back to school is that their mental health and well-being has been adversely affected by the pandemic and the lockdown. Indeed, Professor Siobhan O'Neill, the mental health champion, agreed at the committee some weeks ago that there was a tsunami of mental health and well-being issues among children at the minute. However, the Education Minister's approach seems to be that getting the children back into school will resolve those issues, and that's not good enough. So could the First Minister tell us, will any additional resources be made available to our schools to deal with these mental health and well-being issues? Thank you.
Thanks to the member for his question. Yeah, absolutely. We needed to get our young people back to school for mental health well-being, their socialisation, but also their education and life chances. I think that's really important as well, because they've missed out on so much face-to-face teaching. I've said many times, Mr Speaker, that the kitchen table is no replacement for the classroom, and certainly those of us who have been homeschooling are no substitute for the professional teachers that are in our schools, in no way. In terms of the Education Minister, I understand that he has indicated that he is putting more resources into school. He's already done that since last year in terms of mental health supports. I know that he would want to do more on that, but again, it will be resource-led, and he will, of course, need to have the resource made available to him to do that. But as I understand it, he does have plans to put more money into schools, into the front line, so that people can deal with these mental health issues, which unfortunately we are going to have to deal with.
I'm going to call Trevor Clark.
Mr Speaker, and can I, like others, welcome the statement here today. First Minister, in relation to there's been appreciation for the public health agencies and indeed the vaccination programmes that's been unrolling. I suppose the business sector will probably be disappointed in terms of what they're hearing today. And I would like to put in record, because I'm sure many in this chamber wouldn't want to put in record, but the generosity of Her Majesty Government in terms of some of the financial packages that have been drawn up to support those businesses. However, many of those don't actually cut it for those. Many of the businesses are waiting to get that opportunity to open, to continue to trade as normal. So, following today's announcement, what would your message be to those businesses who will continually be waiting on that announcement that they can actually open and get back to some form of normality?
I do thank the member for his question, and I acknowledge absolutely the fact that Her Majesty's Government has put in place a large amount of resource to try and assist people who have found themselves, through no fault of their own, in the position that they're in, particularly on our high streets. But we also recognise, and if the Economy Minister was here, she would say very clearly that grants are no substitute for being able to open and to do business and to trade, and so we want to be able to allow our businesses to get open again as quickly as possible. I do welcome the fact that colleagues have now agreed to a suggestion that garden centres and plant nurseries will be included in the Click and Collect scheme from the 1st of April. That's before Easter, so that will allow people to avail of those facilities. It's important because, of course, we know that spring is moving into summer, and a lot of gardens need to be planted out, and a lot of people take a lot of solace from their gardens, and therefore it is important that we allow that to happen. And then on the 12th of April, Click and Collect will be allowed for all non-essential retail, and it's only a modest proposal. I accept that. What we need to do is to continue to work with the retail sector, as we need to with other sectors as well, whether that's hospitality or churches, or all of the sectors that we've been engaging with, so that we can move forward together and that there's no surprises in respect of how we're doing our business. So acknowledge this is a hugely difficult time for our business community, but we'll keep engaging with them as we move along.
Karen Mullen, call Karen Mullen.
And I thank the First Minister for the statement today. Minister, just following on from that question there on businesses, could you confirm that if the CRBSS support grant will be extended? And I've just been contacted today around a number of things, but one of the outstanding ones, if you could give us a bit of clarity on if golf is included in the outdoor sports, you'd make a whole lot of people happy if you say yes, and also if there's any update on driving tests resuming.
So, as I understand it, the CRBSS scheme continues for as long as it is needed in terms of those businesses. As I've said to Mr Clark, I mean, it's not ideal that those businesses are closed, but we are trying to support them as much as we can. Good news is that golf can occur now, as long as it's 2 households. We very much believe that walking along a golf course is the same as going out for a walk, but those who play golf would probably disagree with that. But in any event, golf is allowed, tennis is allowed, those sorts of sports where you have 2 households just engaged in it. So that's important as well. And your last question? Oh, the driving test. No, it is deemed to be like a close contact service, so there is no resumption of driving tests at this time, but we will come back to the House with that, and we understand that there's a lot of young people. I know some young people who are desperately waiting on their driving tests. So again, we hope that that will be able to come in due course.
Matthew O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank you to the First Minister for the statement today. I suppose, first of all, someone who originally hails from Downpatrick and then spent many years away from here, I always treasured and enjoyed St Patrick's Day, but I echo what the First Minister said about people enjoying it differently this year, and particularly in my constituency of South Belfast, we want to send out the message that people should please stay away from the Holy Land tomorrow and not give us, not delay our progress in easing. But First Minister, can I specifically ask about around the data and exactly what is being used to make these decisions? While I agree with the cautious approach very much, you mentioned in the statement both social contact capital and a risk-based approach. That sort of indicates a degree of quantitative analysis going on. What are the specific data points you're looking at? Are those around decrease in hospitalisations and a certain number of people or a proportion of people being vaccinated? It would really just be helpful to understand precisely what the data points are that you're looking at.
Okay, so I thank the member for his question, and absolutely, in terms of the health data, we're looking at the rates of transmission. At the moment, Northern Ireland is 66 per 100,000 in terms of our infection rate. I think Scotland is around 64. Wales is much lower, I think in the mid-40s. The Republic of Ireland is about 75. So we're looking at that data. We're looking at the numbers of people in hospital, the numbers of people in ICU, the number of positive cases. And we're also then looking at the fact that this is a new variant which is more transmissible than the original variant. So that's the sort of health data. We are, as I've indicated, waiting on the efficacy data from hospitals in terms of the vaccinations, so that we know how it has impacted on the number of people going into hospitals. In terms of the economic data, we are looking at how the economy has unfortunately shrunk since the beginning of last year, the number of people who are unemployed, how unfortunately we've seen Thornton's Chocolates decide yesterday to leave the high street, how the high street is coping. And then in terms of our societal data, how people are dealing with the lockdown, how we're dealing with their well-being, not being able to socialise in sports in particular. That's one of the reasons why we have front-loaded allowing people to get out and about and enjoy the outside and meet together, albeit outside. So those are the sorts of conversations that are going on within the task force, trying to balance up all of those different metrics. It's not an exact science. We have tried to prioritise young people and children, and of course we do absolutely recognise the need to get our economy into a state where we can start to recover as well.
Robbie Butler.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank the First Minister for her address today. I want to thank her for linking hope and Easter. I think that is important that we do send out a message of hope. And I'm sure there are many parents, carers and teachers who will look forward to their pupils and students and children returning to school very soon, as do all of us. But the Minister will be well aware that there was an inflexibility this year with regard to the transfer test, and some children were left to suffer. There are many calls, professional calls, for the need for children to be able to emotionally regulate before we educate. And what we seem to be seeing now is an inagility, perhaps with GCSE and A-level exams, where returning students are faced immediately with the threat of having to sit stressful exams. And we do know that children have been hard hit through this pandemic. Can the Minister give a commitment that the Executive Office will look at this with the Education Minister to make our children a priority on the return to school? And I just want to take the opportunity to wish everybody a happy St Patrick's Day.
Well, I thank the member for his question. The Executive has tried to prioritise children's well-being and educational life chances, and I mean, we're parents as well as ministers, so we know the impact that not having schools open has had. We do pay tribute to the way in which teachers have been engaging in remote learning with our young people. But it is so important that they get back in that face-to-face environment, not just with their teachers, but also with their peers, so they can have that socialisation. In terms of the exams and testing, as he will know, the Education Minister leads on all of those issues. He's very alert to the fact that we'll not be sitting GCSEs this year, but we'll have to find some way of finding academic achievement for those young people who have spent so long building up to the years 12 and 14. So it's very important that we recognise the challenges for teachers and for pupils, but at the same time allow them to do those testing processes so that they can have something to move forward with. I think that's very important for their life chances as well. And just in respect of linking hope to what we're trying to do, we did have a very good meeting with the 4 main church leaders yesterday. We talked about hope. We talked about the fact that we had been in a very dark place over this past year. Many people had lost loved ones, and that's why we do feel that having this time of reflection, and if you are Christian prayer on Easter Sunday, is something that I hope most people will recognise as a sort of coming together, obviously apart in our own homes on Easter Sunday, but taking some time to reflect and to thank God for his mercies, actually, from my point of view, over this past year, and I think that that is very important.
Christopher Stalford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The announcement has been made that preschool through to P7 pupils would be returning. I want to raise the issue of Sure Start. I'm given to understand that for 10 days or thereabouts, the Department of Health has been assessing this issue in terms of whether or not Sure Start can open. First Minister, my right honourable friend, will know the wonderful work that Sure Start does, particularly with vulnerable children. Can I encourage her and executive colleagues to quickly expedite a decision in relation to this issue in order that Sure Start can recommence their wonderful and important work?
So I thank the member for his question, and can I agree with him wholeheartedly that Sure Start does provide a great resource for vulnerable children and their families right across Northern Ireland, and it is my hope that we will be able to have that matter dealt with through the task force which is set up to look at all of these matters. And as I've said, there's a flexibility there, so we should really be looking at Sure Start and indeed other schemes that are there for our young people, because we do recognise that for some young people, home is not the safest place. School probably is a much safer place for those young people, and some of them very much need support of their youth leaders. Therefore, I do hope that we can come to this place and make an announcement in relation to Sure Start and other youth programmes in the very near future.
Member Sinead Annis. I call Sinead Annis.
And I thank the ministers for their statement today. I'm delighted to see a tentative return to sport has been announced today, and personally I'm excited to get home and get the football boots hooked out, get the gum shield hooked out and get back to kicking a football again. Does the Minister agree that facilitating a return to sport is crucial for our recovery, for our mental and physical well-being? And would the Minister agree that continuing that engagement with sporting bodies and with clubs will be critically important in the time ahead as we make our way out of lockdown, and that we keep our kids and our young people on the pitch where they belong?
So thank the member for her question, and yes, there has been ongoing discussions, I understand, between the Department for Communities and the sporting bodies. They're very keen, and you will have heard a lot of very stellar people telling us that they need to allow our young people in particular to get back to sport for their well-being. And it was one of the things that we really spoke about quite a lot at the Executive, the need to be out in the fresh air and enjoying sport. So that's why 10 people from 2 households can undertake the outdoor sporting activities from the 1st of April, so that's before Easter, and then after Easter it's the sports training which will be governed by the sporting bodies of up to 15 people outside again, not indoors but outside, and I think that the sporting codes will very much welcome that, as indeed with a lot of young people and not so young people who want to get out.
Call Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, First Minister. Just following on from the comment that has just been made about mental health in the community, next Tuesday I hope to take part in the Day of Reflection that's been called for by Marie Curie and others. But when I think about the community and voluntary sector, That's a sector who will be looking forward, as we all are, to this phased reopening, but they're exhausted. This is a community and voluntary sector that have supported us throughout the whole of the pandemic. Many of them have not yet received letters of offer of funding to keep them going. I'm just wondering, can we now help those who have supported us the most during this pandemic and make sure that they are aware when they can get back, because they will be providing the community with mental health support that we have really missed?
Thank the member for her question, and I too hope to take part in that Marie Curie Day of Reflection. I think it also is a time we're thinking about the fact that we have been a year in dealing with this issue. I remember standing here, Mr. Speaker, and saying I hope that we would be in a much better place by Christmas, and that was at the start of all of this, and here we are in March still dealing with these terrible issues. In terms of our voluntary and community sector, they have been absolute heroes in many communities right across Northern Ireland and have gone the extra mile in terms of delivering, in terms of dealing with isolation. And as she will know, the Red Cross brought us a report very recently about the real problems of isolation that are going on. And again, we're hoping that the task force can look at those issues of isolation. In terms of the funding issues, given that we are coming towards the end of March, I would be concerned if there are bodies who haven't received their letter of offer and who have been successful in gaining that funding. So if there's any in particular that she wants to come to us about, she should do that, and we will certainly look at that.
Can we please bring Justin McNulty on screen? Can I invite Justin McNulty to put his question?
Gurma Yogut, Con Carla, Bannock T, La Fela, Poyla Gorv. Thank the Minister for her statement and for her answers thus far. Minister, advance of today, about a month ago, 15 sporting bodies were represented in terms of a correspondence to yourself and your fellow First Minister in relation to the reopening of youth sports. Now, those sporting bodies, those sporting organisations have not received a response from you. And in advance of the review today, there was anticipation, discussion and huge excitement about the potential restart of youth sports. I'm not seeing any detail in relation to that in the statement, Minister. Can you provide clarity on when a return to youth sports will actually take place?
So I thank the member for his question. We decided that we should make sport available for those of all ages, and so 10 people from 2 households can undertake outdoor sporting activities after the 1st of April. If he's talking about more organised sporting, then after the 12th of April, outdoor sports training is resumed by sports clubs affiliated with recognised sports governing bodies in small groups of up to 15 people, but again, indoor spaces are closed. So it's not just youth sport that we are listening to, it's all sports, and I think that that is important for people of all ages.
Thank you. And I call Cara Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Ministers for their statement. On the relaxation of rules and the COVID pathway, with respect to my constituency of East Derry, businesses in areas like Portrush, Portstewart and Port Ballantrae thrive and oftentimes depend heavily on tourism. Will the Executive give them appropriate prior notice to reopening so that they can get in stock, supply and things that are necessary for reopening? And does the First Minister recognise the huge impact that these lockdowns have had on towns that are dependent on tourism? Thank you.
Thank the member for her question. Absolutely acknowledge that in East Londonderry and right across Northern Ireland there are towns and villages that are very dependent, including my own constituency, on tourism. We recognise that the tourism industry has taken a huge hit in relation to this matter. We had built the tourism sector up to one, it was at its largest ever just before the COVID-19 pandemic struck. So therefore, we hope that during the summertime, again, a lot of people will decide to stay at home for their holidays this year, and hopefully there will be the ability for people to visit all of our beautiful parts of Northern Ireland. But it is important that we continue to speak with the tourism sector. As I understand it, officials from our department had a discussion with Colin Neal of Tourism Ulster yesterday, and we will continue those conversations, because she's absolutely right to say that they need to have advance notice They do, because they need to bring in their stock, their staff, train them up, get them into a position that they're ready to welcome guests, and that is why there needs to be a space between an announcement and the time in which they're going to open. So we'll continue that engagement with the sector. We know that they need advance notice, and we hope that we will be able to give that to them.
I call Rachel Woods.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the First and Deputy First Ministers for coming here and the statement to the House. I too am looking forward to get back my football boots on, but I have 2 detailed constituency queries that I've received this afternoon, with your indulgence, Mr Speaker. Firstly, Mr Selford has already mentioned it on Sure Start, but when will Sure Start developmental programme for 2 to 3-year-olds begin? And also, does the outdoor sports training from the 12th of April include outdoor yoga, adhering to social distancing, and if not, could it?
So thank the member for her queries. In terms of yoga, absolutely, after the 12th of April outside. Cannot see a reason why you wouldn't be able to engage in yoga outside, as I say, in groups of no more than 15. The Sure Start developmental programme, as I've indicated to my friend Mr Salford, that request from the Department of Education has gone into the task force, so I hope that we will have a response from the task force, because it's very important that those young people have that support, and I hope that that will be dealt with sooner rather than later.
I call Jim Allister.
Thank you. I welcome the overdue return of our children to school, but this timid Tuesday will be a disappointment to many, most particularly our retailers and critical businesses. The last statement was built around a buzz phrase about being data-driven. This statement is built around a new buzz phrase, social contact capital, though it seems to be blighted by a lot of executive austerity when it comes to spending the capital. But the question I want to ask is this: if we're still data-driven, what were the targets attained today to enable the first triggering of relaxation? And what will be the next targets in respect of each of the data, transmissions, hospital admissions, etc., that enables the next phase to be targeted? I think the public should be trusted by knowing that, rather than waiting, hopefully. They should know what the standards are, surely.
I thank the member for his question. I have a lot of sympathy for his point. The social contact capital is a phrase, as I think I indicated in my speech, from the Department of Health. What we're talking about essentially, and I think what we've referred to in the past, and my goodness, hasn't this year been a year of new phrases and new acronyms that we've become familiar with? I think it's about the headroom that we have in terms of making these decisions. I wish we had been able to have all children back at school before Easter. I think I've been very clear on that. But we are in a position now where at least we have certainty for those young people. All of primary is back before Easter, and years 12 to 14, and then the rest of the children go back directly after Easter. We have, I think, set out that these are cautious steps. I know there are some in the chamber that feel they are too cautious, but we are led by advice given to us by our medical advisors, and they are saying that this is what is available to us at this point in time. In terms of more clarity in relation to data, I'll certainly pass those remarks on to the Department of Health. I don't, as I say, disagree with them. I think it is important that we are as open as possible with the community so that they can understand why these decisions are being taken.
Call Keith Archibald.
And I thank the First Ministers for their statement. First Minister, the business support schemes, and there's a whole raft of acronyms for them, have been really important to help businesses during the restrictions, but families and businesses are going to also need practical support to rebuild once we are able to reopen our economy and society, obviously as guided by the pathway. One of the support schemes that has been proposed is the High Street Voucher Scheme, and I was just wondering if you could give some update in respect to that.
So, as I understand it, the High Street voucher scheme is still very much something that we plan to do. The money is still available to us from the Department of Finance. The Department for Economy will decide when is the best time to reinvigorate that. Obviously, our retail, non-essential retail, is not yet open, so we want to be able to really lead on that whenever retail is opening up again. In terms of the practical support as well, at the Executive last week, there was a very clear commitment given to fund the recovery of Northern Ireland. The Economy Minister has put forward quite detailed schemes as to what she needs to do, that not least around skills, as I'm sure the member would acknowledge. So we will absolutely need to do a lot more in the recovery phase. We're only stepping out of the restrictions now, but the recovery stage will need a lot of support as well.
Jerry Carroll.
Given the schools have been given short notice again, it shows continued disrespect by the Education Minister towards staff in schools. And given the move to change from stay at home, given that more and more people will be obviously working in schools with these regulation changes, what consideration has the First Minister given to increasing social isolation support payments, because currently they're not adequate enough?
Well, as I think I indicated, the stay-at-home message is in place until the 12th of April. Obviously, there are those people who can't stay at home and have to work in their places of work, so they will be, of course, expected to do that rather than stay at home, and that's always been the case. There certainly hasn't been any disrespect to school staff from the Education Minister. I do note that there's a great deal of disrespect, I have to say, from the Education Committee to the Education Minister, and I noted that many of the members were hugely disrespectful to the Education Minister when he was actually at an executive meeting. However, the Education Committee thinks that they should take priority to an executive meeting. That's not the way it works. The executive takes priority. And I think there are many members on the Education Committee who should apologise to the Education Minister.
Members, that concludes questions on the statement. Thank you for all the contributions. Just take your ease for 1 minute, please.